War is unforgiving. On the battlefield, even the smallest mechanical failure can mean the difference between life and death. A soldier must trust his weapon completely. In the chaos of combat, there is no time for hesitation, no time for doubt. When a soldier pulls the trigger, the weapon must fire. When he pulls the bolt back, it must move. And when he needs to reload under enemy fire, the rifle must work every single time. But history has shown us that not all weapons live up to that expectation. Some weapons are poorly designed, some are rushed into service, and some are simply not suited for the brutal conditions of war. During the early years of World War I, millions of soldiers fought in some of the harshest environments ever seen on a battlefield. The trenches of Europe were filled with mud, rain, smoke, and constant artillery fire. In those conditions, reliability was everything. But one rifle, despite being innovative and accurate, would become infamous among the soldiers who were forced to use it. Many troops complained about it, some refused to carry it, and a few even claimed that this rifle could be more dangerous to its owner than to the enemy. This is the story of the Ross rifle. At the beginning of the 20th century, many countries were modernizing their armies. Military technology was advancing rapidly, and nations wanted to equip their soldiers with the most advanced weapons available. Canada was no exception. At the time, Canada was still part of the British Empire. Because of this, Canadian troops often used British military equipment. The standard rifle of the British Army was the famous Lee Enfield. The Lee Enfield was already well known for its reliability and fast rate of fire. It had proven itself in numerous conflicts and was trusted by soldiers across the empire. But some Canadian officials wanted something different. They wanted Canada to have its own rifle, a national weapon designed specifically for Canadian troops. This idea led to the creation of a completely new rifle designed by a Scottish aristocrat and engineer named Charles Ross. Ross believed he could design a rifle that was faster, more accurate, and more modern than the rifles currently used by other armies. His design would eventually become known as the Ross rifle. When the Ross rifle was first introduced, it impressed many military officials. At first glance, it seemed like a technological breakthrough. Unlike traditional rifles of the time, the Ross rifle used a straight pull bolt action. Most bolt action rifles required the shooter to rotate the bolt handle upward, pull it back, push it forward, and then rotate it downward again. This process worked well, but required multiple movements. The Ross rifle simplified the process. Instead of rotating the bolt, the shooter could simply pull it straight back and push it forward again. This meant faster cycling of the rifle. In theory, soldiers could fire more quickly and maintain a higher rate of fire. On shooting ranges, the Ross rifle performed extremely well. It was known for its impressive accuracy, sometimes even outperforming other rifles used by European armies. In fact, many competitive shooters admired the rifle. For target shooting, it was excellent. But the battlefield is very different from a shooting range. When World War I began in 1914, Canada quickly mobilized its forces. Thousands of Canadian soldiers crossed the Atlantic Ocean and arrived in Europe to fight alongside British and Allied troops. They brought their new rifle with them. At first, everything seemed normal, but soon problems began to appear. The Western Front was unlike anything soldiers had ever experienced. The war quickly turned into a brutal stalemate. Armies dug massive trench systems stretching across hundreds of miles. These trenches were not clean or organized. They were filthy. Mud was everywhere. Rain constantly flooded the trenches. Soldiers lived in damp, miserable conditions for weeks or even months at a time. And those conditions were extremely hard on weapons. The Ross rifle had been designed with precision in mind, but precision often comes with a cost. The internal mechanism of the Ross rifle required very tight tolerances. This meant the moving parts inside the rifle had little room for debris. In clean conditions, this was not a problem, but on the Western Front, dirt and mud were unavoidable. Mud would enter the rifle's mechanism. When that happened, the bolt could become extremely difficult to operate. Soldiers sometimes found themselves unable to pull the bolt back after firing a shot. In combat, this was a serious problem. Imagine being in the middle of a firefight. You fire your rifle, you attempt to reload, but the bolt refuses to move. Every second counts, and while you struggle with your weapon, the enemy is still shooting. This situation happened far more often than military officials had expected. But the Ross rifle had another problem, one that was even more dangerous. The rifle could be disassembled for cleaning. This was normal for most firearms. However, the Ross rifle had a complicated bolt assembly. If a soldier reassembled the bolt incorrectly after cleaning the rifle, something very dangerous could happen. The bolt might appear to be locked in place, but it actually was not. When the rifle was fired in this condition, the bolt could be forced backward by the pressure of the cartridge. In simple terms, the bolt could shoot straight out the back of the rifle, and that meant it could strike the soldier directly in the face. Several serious injuries were reported because of this issue. Stories about these accidents quickly spread among soldiers. Confidence in the rifle began to collapse. As the war continued, Canadian soldiers became increasingly frustrated with the Ross rifle. Many soldiers reported that the rifle jammed frequently during combat. Others complained about the difficulty of maintaining it in muddy trench conditions. Some soldiers went even further. Instead of continuing to use the Ross rifle, they simply discarded it. When possible, they picked up British rifles, particularly the reliable Lee Enfield. This was an extraordinary situation. Soldiers are normally required to use the equipment issued by their army. Throwing away a standard service rifle was almost unheard of. Yet on the Western Front, it began to happen more and more frequently. One of the moments that exposed the rifle's weaknesses most dramatically occurred during the Second Battle of Ypres. This battle was one of the most significant early engagements of the war. It was also the first time German forces used large-scale poison gas on the battlefield. Canadian soldiers found themselves fighting under extremely difficult conditions. The battle was chaotic. Gas attacks, artillery bombardments, and intense infantry fighting created a terrifying environment. In these conditions, many Ross rifles began to malfunction. Mud clogged their mechanisms. Bolts jammed. Some soldiers found themselves unable to reload their rifles during critical moments. In desperation, some Canadians picked up rifles from fallen British soldiers in order to continue fighting. Reports from the front soon reached military commanders and politicians back in Canada. The Ross rifle had become a major controversy. Many officers demanded that the rifle be replaced, but replacing the weapon was not simple. Thousands of rifles had already been manufactured. Factories were producing more. Admitting that the rifle was flawed would be politically embarrassing. As a result, the issue became a heated debate. Some officials defended the rifle. Others insisted that it was unsuitable for trench warfare. Meanwhile, soldiers at the front continued to struggle with the weapon. Eventually, the complaints became impossible to ignore. In 1916, the Canadian military made a crucial decision. The Ross rifle would be withdrawn from frontline service. It would be replaced with the reliable Lee Enfield used by the British Army. This decision ended one of the most controversial chapters in Canadian military equipment history. Interestingly, the story of the Ross rifle did not end there. Despite its problems in trench warfare, the rifle still had some strengths. One of its greatest advantages was accuracy. Because of this, the Ross rifle found a new role. It became a sniper rifle. In the hands of trained marksmen operating from concealed positions, the rifle's precision made it extremely effective. Snipers often worked in cleaner conditions and fired fewer shots, which reduced the risk of jamming. In this role, the rifle performed much better. Today, the Ross rifle remains a fascinating example of how weapon design can succeed in some areas while failing in others. It was innovative, it was accurate, but it was not suited for the brutal realities of trench warfare. War places unique demands on equipment. Weapons must function in mud, rain, cold, and chaos. And sometimes simplicity and reliability matter more than innovation. The story of the Ross rifle reminds us that technology alone cannot guarantee success on the battlefield. A weapon might look impressive, it might perform perfectly on a shooting range, but the true test comes in the unpredictable conditions of war. For Canadian soldiers during World War I, the Ross rifle became a symbol of this lesson. A rifle that promised speed and accuracy, but one that ultimately failed to earn the trust of the soldiers who carried it. And in war, trust in your weapon may be the most important thing of all.